Hello, I'm here to present SALVE, which stands for Server Authentication with Location Verification. My name is Yuan, and we're from ETH Zurich. In this talk, we will explore the use of geographic locations of websites to strengthen server authentication. So, server authentication. Imagine you're connecting to your online banking website located in, let's say, Switzerland. You want to make sure that you're connected to the right website, to the authentic website. So server authentication here is typically achieved using certificates, which are issued by certificate authorities that certify the secret keys of the web server. And it goes as such. So when the browser visits the website, they establish a TLS handshake. And it's during this handshake that the certificate is sent to the browser for it to verify, or validate. So once certificate validation is successful, both sides share a common secret for later secure communication. And this is what happens currently with the browser CA model. Unfortunately, such a model is vulnerable to a lot of security issues that leads to the possibility of strong server impersonation attacks. In a strong impersonation attack, first, it has been shown that certificate authorities can be compromised, which allows the attacker to generate fraudulent certificates that can trick the client into erroneously validating it. In addition, it has also been shown recently that software hacks, vulnerabilities, allow the attacker to further obtain the secret keys that are certified by a legitimate certificate. Such issues are real and have been reported. This means that the browser could be tricked into connecting to a remote attacker, somebody who could not be in Switzerland, for example, in this case, maybe in Algeria. And since certificates are compromised, the browser erroneously validates it and mistakes it for the authentic server. So there are a lot of related work to strengthen server authentication in this regard to solve this issue. Such techniques range from certificate pinning, revocation mechanisms, or to the latest popular certificate transparency mechanisms. However, most of these techniques defend against the case where the certificate authority has been compromised. The compromise of server secret keys has so far not been sufficiently addressed. In this talk, in our work, our contribution is location-based server authentication, and one of our specific goals is to address this. We propose location as a security factor. Our solution is secure against remote attackers. Our solution can be integrated with existing TLS software as well as existing infrastructure and standards, since we leverage the existing infrastructures. Our solution also adds minimal overhead, as we will show later on during evaluation. Now, compared to related work, our work additionally deals with the compromise of server secret keys, essentially using location as an additional security factor. The first question we need to ask is, how can location be used as an additional factor? Well, the reason for this to be true is twofold. First of all, modern data centers are protected using a wide range of physical protection mechanisms, ranging from security cameras, perimeter fencing, fancy things like laser intrusion detection, all the way to security patrols and guards. For the determined attacker who might use drones to aerially penetrate the premises of data centers, there are also products and techniques to detect the presence of drones, disable them, and even capture them. So essentially, with the presence of physical protection, it is costly for the attacker to co-locate with a data center. Now, in addition to the secure protection of data center locations, we also need a way to securely or reliably obtain location information. For this, we rely on the location services deployed by the telecom industry. So currently, your SIM card that are installed in, let's say, your smart devices, such as your phone or maybe even your laptop, are and can already be localized by nearby base stations. This has been a recent push by the telecom industry to cater to various applications such as social networking and emergency services. They rely on techniques such as uplink TDOA, as previously discussed, and other RSSI-based methods. Recent work has shown that the average accuracy of such techniques are on the order of 7.1%. So let's give you a sort of a clearer picture of how accurate this can be in our current scenario. So this is where we are, the Graduate Center, and all of these colored pins that you see are the base stations that we have nearby. Let's take a typical pair of base stations right near the Graduate Center. They are distanced about 85 meters apart, which translates to about 7 meters of accuracy, 7.7 yards. So now that we know that such accuracy is tolerable for large-scale data centers, is actually reasonable for large-scale data centers, we know that such a mechanism for calculating location is possible. So the location is obtained and sent to the LCS or location services server, and it can later be distributed to other services such as emergency response or other upcoming social network content. The distribution of such location information uses the mobile location protocol. This protocol is established, standardized, and supports authentication and authorization of location information access. This essentially means that as an owner of the SIM card, you can control who is allowed to access the location of your SIM device. So now that we know that there is a way to distribute and obtain location information, and as well there are physical protections of private data center locations, security, we can use location as an additional security factor. So let's take the example of the banking server in Switzerland again. We propose installing the SIM card to the server, allowing it to be localized by nearby base stations, and its location can be stored at the location service. Now we have location as a security indicator that can be used in SALVE, where the client verifies the server's authenticity using its location as well. So for the client to verify the server's authenticity, the browser needs to know two things. First of all, it needs to know where should the server be right now. What are the legitimate server locations? For this, we use the existing DNS infrastructure, and we propose a location-aware DNS lookup. Additionally, the browser also needs to know where is the server right now. For this, we propose a modification or an extension to the TLS handshake called the location-aware TLS handshake, and it leverages the location services to attest to the location of the server at hand. Right. So what is important here is another requirement. The location information here should be bound to the secure channel that is being established, this particular channel established between this client and the server. This is to prevent against other fancy middle attacks or replay attacks, which are detailed in the paper. So first, let's take a look at location-aware DNS lookup. This is relatively straightforward. We use DNS to store all of the legitimate server locations, since there might be multiple locations for a particular website. DNS is widely deployed, scalable, so it can be readily used. Moreover, in the DNS standards, they also define location records to contain the information of where websites are located, currently in the form of longitude and latitude coordinates. To ensure that DNS records are secured or authentic, various pushes, such as DNSSEC, have also been proposed to ensure the record authenticity. Now, this is just to let the client or the browser know where the server should be. There are other alternatives, such as pinning or input from user knowledge, to program the browser with the a priori knowledge. Now, let's talk about location-aware TLS handshake. As I mentioned before, we implemented this handshake as an extension to the standard TLS handshake. Recall here that we have the server installed with a SIM card, which is localized by the location services, who stores its location. In a standard TLS handshake, the browser connects to the server, and the server sends the certificate over for the client to verify. After the verification is successful, both sides share a common secret for later secure communication. That's the standard part. In our added location verification, what we do here is to verify the server's location. First, we have one important requirement, and this requirement is that the shared secret established between the client and the browser are computed using ephemeral Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocols. This is already best practices by the industry since it provides security against man-in-the-middle attacks, and it provides desirable security properties such as perfect forward secrecy. So now that this requirement is satisfied, the server computes the hash of the shared secret and sends it over to the location services to request for location statement. Now here, such a request requires us to impose another requirement. And this requirement is that only the server is authorized to query for the location. This prevents against anybody else from obtaining the location statement. Now, such a mechanism is already standard in the MLP protocol, in the mobile location protocol, which supports, as I mentioned before, authentication and authorization techniques. So now that the location services have the hash of the key, it concatenates the location with this hash and signs such a statement, essentially binding the location to the channel. This statement is later returned to the server, who forwards it to the browser for it to verify. The browser verifies the location statement as follows. First, it checks whether or not the signature of a statement is authentic according to the public key of the location service. Second, it checks whether or not the hash of the shared secret is the same as the hash that it has computed locally. Third, and finally, it checks whether or not the location belongs to one of the legitimate locations that it fetched from DNS. An important thing to notice here that we sent the hash to the location service in the first place, and this is to prevent the location service from learning the secret, which should be anyway secret amongst only the client and the web server. All right, so now with location verification, our handshake allows the client to authenticate the server using the certificate and its location. Let's take a look at how this defends against the server impersonation attack. Now, intuitively, since we also verified the location of the web server, or whichever web server that the client is connected to, the attacker being remote or being outside of the premises of the data center will be detected by SALVE. Essentially, this implies that the attacker needs to do more. The attacker needs to invest more effort, essentially, into the impersonation attack. One way could be co-locating with the server, which, as we have shown, is guarded with physical protection, which makes it costly. The other would be to compromise our solution, or the components in the SALVE proposal. This essentially, overall, makes it harder for the attacker to impersonate the authentic server. All right, so now that we have shown the entire protocol and also argued about its security, we can talk about how our solution fares in the real world. To evaluate our approach, we implemented a prototype of SALVE using existing software such as Chromium for the web browser and Apache for the web server. The use of these existing software also showed that our solution is feasible to realize and deploy. Since SALVE is implemented in software extensions, it also doesn't require any change to existing standards. So we first take a look at the client-side latency. The TLS handshake that we modified adds about 20 milliseconds to the overall TLS handshake time. The verification of location statements adds about under than, well, 1 millisecond to verify the location statements. Compared to a typical web page loading times, which is on the order of 3 seconds or even more, our solution, the overhead of SALVE, would not be easily noticed by the user. This makes it efficient for deployment on the user side. What about the client side? For the client side, we also evaluate the server performance using a global scale evaluation that uses the Planet Lab infrastructure. We use Apache Bench to run the simulations. We run the server locally in Switzerland and run Planet Lab nodes as clients globally in Switzerland first, Germany, the US, and Japan. We performed over 50,000 trials, and here are the results. So the white bar that you see here are the throughput of the TLS handshake, and they act as a baseline for the data comparison, the vanilla handshake. Now, the gray bar represents the location-aware TLS handshake, the throughput of such a handshake. And as you can observe here, there is only a minimal impact, and actually none of these were ever over 5%. So this shows that the server-side overhead is tolerable for server deployment and server providers. To summarize, it is also efficient for the client side. So overall, both the server side and the client side are covered. All right, so there are a lot of other parts of our approach that are worth talking about a bit more. First, the localization technique can be improved using secure localization methods such as secure ranging or secure multilateration. This is to complement existing localization methods to address certain cases where the SIM card owner has an incentive to cheat its location. Next, there might be suburban areas where the data centers are deployed and where base stations are not dense enough to obtain a highly accurate estimate of the data center's location. Let's take a look at Google's data center in Iowa as an example. So here again, you see the pins representing the base stations. A typical distance between these base stations might be on the order of 360 meters, which translates to about 25 meters of accuracy. Now, given that data centers anyway span about hundreds of meters for their buildings, this accuracy should be sufficient for proper and reliable localization. However, if any of these service providers or any of these website owners wish to improve the accuracy of their localization, they can lease certain femtocells from service providers and install them on site to provide more accurate estimations of their website location. There might be certain cases where the website owner has incentives to hide their website locations. This might be particularly true for the case of banking servers and such. In our paper, we also talk about certain use of zero-knowledge proofs, anonymous credentials to prove the server's location in a privacy-preserving manner. Now, there might also be a really worst case where the attacker is ultimately able to co-locate with the server by penetrating one of its perimeter defenses. In our paper, we also talk about an extension of our approach to deal with such an attack. In addition, there are also other details about how our solution can be optimized and how it can be extended and incorporated into existing or upcoming TLS protocols. Right, so to conclude, we propose location-based server authentication. We use server location as an additional factor, and our solution is secure against remote attackers while allowing deployment that is easy to realize and integrates with existing solutions. Compared to existing work, which typically addresses the compromise of certificate authorities, our work defends against the compromise of server secret keys by adding an additional security factor. So with the use of location, we now have a new way to authenticate the web. Thank you for your attention.